Steve Cardwell is the Superintendent CEO of the Vancouver School District. During 9 years as a teacher in Kitimat, Mr. Cardwell was in various leadership roles in science education and as an official for the BCTF. Beginning in 1991, he served as an administrator in the Richmond and Delta school districts, eventually serving as superintendent. Steve earned his Bachelor of Science in Biology and MA from UBC and is currently nearing completion of his education doctorate at SFU. His research focus is student engagement in urban secondary schools. Currently, Steve Cardwell also serves as the president of the BC School Superintendents Association, a highly visible and influential role of leadership in BC public education. We welcome Superintendent Steve Cardwell of Vancouver to Your Education Matters. Steve, I'd like to begin by asking you to describe the BC School Superintendents Association and what your responsibilities as president are.
Okay. Well, first of all, Paul, it's a pleasure to be here and to be representing the BC Superintendents Association. It is a long-standing organization. It was born in 1919, which was a time of significant change for British Columbia, and I like to refer back to history and see that tradition as it moves through to current times. My role is to represent the superintendents and assistant superintendents, directors of instruction across British Columbia. We have about 230 members, somewhat shrinking as budgets impact the number of members, but also changing in that the demographics are that we have a number of retirements occurring and new people coming on board as assistant superintendents and superintendents across the province. We have 60 superintendents, and we meet occasionally through our conferences and through other opportunities. I have an executive that I work with, excellent people who assist in developing policy and giving voice to the superintendents. And I go back to the early days of the superintendency in British Columbia, and at the time of the turn of the century, as the BCTF was also forming around 1917, so was the Superintendents Association. It has evolved over time from being fairly recently provincially appointed group of superintendents. We used to refer to them as the people in the green jackets. This was before my time, but back in the 1970s and early 80s, that was the case. As policy changed and the provincial governments determined that school districts over 20,000 students could appoint their own superintendents, that change in centralization versus decentralization changed. Then it evolved even further through, I believe it was Brian Smith of the day in the early 1980s who made the ruling that any school district with 250 students or more could appoint their own superintendent, and so that's the case we have today. We sometimes have dual superintendents and secretary treasurers in school districts, but in general the superintendent is the key appointment of the school board. We report to our school boards across the province. So the role of the Superintendents Association is to be the active voice for education, for public education in this province, and I'm proud to serve as a leader of that organization.
Well, you point to something interesting that I've noticed here, which is there is this ambiguous tradition of whether the superintendent reports to the board or reports to the ministry.
Yes.
And in coming to BC, I've noticed that that makes it feel different than it did for me in the states, in the 5 states in the United States where I worked. There still is a little element of feeling that there is a kind of reporting relationship between the superintendent and the ministry.
And I agree. Our role is defined in the School Act. We have certain responsibilities as defined by the School Act. And so as such, we report to the minister. But on the other hand, my contract is with my board, and I report directly to the board. That presents some challenge at times when there may be differences But I think if we are to take the high road and represent public education and the needs of students and parents in the system, then we can't go too far wrong.
And one of the manifestations that I notice about this is that the superintendents seem to exercise their influence a lot more behind closed doors, whereas in the United States, they very often are out in front as spokespersons, and as long as they have the support of their board, they have a good deal of autonomy and ability to speak out, whereas here, that's not the way it works. I notice that the superintendents have to exercise their influence, it seems to me, more in private and less as public spokesperson. Now, your career's been here, so I don't know if you notice that difference, because it's probably as natural as the air you breathe to you.
It is, and I think that dilemma in terms of the dual reporting relationship gets in the way somewhat with respect to voicing opinion. However, I would say it is changing. We are quite willing to speak behind closed doors with the minister and with various stakeholders as we attend provincial roundtable meetings and other opportunities. But we are also attentive to current trends in education and speak out about those. We bring in key speakers, people who influence education, and in doing so, we are also influencing public education. We write into the local media, the newspapers. We comment on media, broadcast media such as yourself. And I think there's a growing role for superintendents to be able to express opinion and, as I said, represent public education and represent the needs and desires of our students.
I'm glad to hear that, because superintendents not only have a leadership title, but they are leaders. They merit the recognition, and their opinions are ones that we could very well hear used in the public debate. On the other hand, it does allow them to have a little more continuity in their work life. I mean, in the U.S., urban superintendents are only serving about 3 years.
Yes.
So they are lightning rods, and school board support or not, that changes. So perhaps it's inevitable that you have one path or the other. You can't do both things.
Yeah. Well, I think your point about the U.S. environment being somewhat different from the Canadian environment, we look to the south and we know that superintendents make a career of 2 or 3 years or somewhat like that in one district, and then they hop to the next. And they command very high salaries, I would say, as well,
yes,
in some jurisdictions. I believe in British Columbia as much as across Canada. We do respond very well to the needs of the province and the needs of the provincial government of the day, and we are circumspect in terms of how we respond to needs. We're not a political organization, and as long as we stay focused on public education, then I think we're doing the right thing.
So to focus down on some of the main issues that are on your plate these days in your job as an individual with Vancouver School Board and also with the School Superintendents Association, what are the priority issues?
The last probably 5 years as a member of the executive of the British Columbia School Superintendents Association, and this last year as president, we have been pushing for a system redesign. We believe that the last 100 years or so of education has served British Columbia well. We know that BC does exceptionally well on international standards, 3rd, 4th, or 5th in the world in reading, mathematics, science. However, we also realize that we can't stand still, and there is a need for change. And it is not just change in curriculum, but change in how we approach schooling. Schooling largely grew up through an industrialized model that contemplated disciplines, subject-based disciplines. We believe the real world is not like that. You don't spend an hour at math and an hour in English and an hour in social studies. It's changing, and the same for the school year. We're no longer based on an agricultural agrarian model. We believe that a balanced school year might be a better approach, but we realize again that that's a difficult one to contemplate. So system redesign and all that might mean is one area that has been a focus for quite a few years now in terms of bringing in speakers and having discussions about that and providing quiet influence with government. And as late as this week, the government is moving forward with a view to personalized learning. The other side of this, Paul, is with respect to the labor climate. And we expect in this next year some significant challenges with our employee groups. This for us is going to be very difficult to maintain balance in our system, keep a focus on our students in the classroom, but respect the collective bargaining processes as we move forward through the year.
So I'm wondering about some of the obstacles that you face in addressing the issues that you've talked about. I'm guessing that one has to do with funding. I'm wondering if any have to do with our governance structure. Mm-hmm. Those are two that come to my mind, and maybe you have something else. But what obstacles do you feel need to be addressed in order to bring the reforms that the organization is in favor of?
Yeah, I believe governance structure is probably one of the main areas that we need to review, to look at how schooling is organized, whether or not we continue with the present model of K through 12 schooling, or whether we look to other choice mechanisms that might provide a greater opportunity for our students. And we have examples of that, and I don't want to take away from the great value that we have in our classrooms. I believe we are second to none in terms of what takes place in our schools. Working in Vancouver School District that has great extremes in terms of wealth and poverty. Our educators do a tremendous job. We need to do a better job in terms of providing support for them, for our educators in the system and our support staff. And that takes some change in how we operate and the relationships between our schools, our school district, and the province.
So I hear you talking about innovation and thinking outside the box. I hear behind what you're saying that you'd like to really see some things done differently, but I suppose you pilot some of those things already in Vancouver.
Yes, we do. We've got some great examples of what might be called personalized learning or personalizing learning that provides much more attention to the individual learner. The direction in terms of full inclusion also attends to the needs of each individual. We can do a lot more. I believe we are looking at doing a lot more, but we have great examples from our mini schools in Vancouver to programs that support design, multidisciplinary studies, some of our alternate programs that I think are actually great models of a new way of learning for schools that are much more problem-based, multidisciplinary in terms of delivery of instruction.
I have a feeling that the funding issue comes into play as you seek to implement these innovations, however.
Well, you raised the funding issue at the start, and I agree that funding is a challenge for all school districts, and I recognize that's a challenge for the province. Priority for the provincial system needs to be education. I realize that it competes with health care for those dollars that can assist us. We need to do a little better in terms of how we utilize the funds that we receive, and I think there are some ways to, through our business side, our management side, to enable us to leverage funds to put those monies back into the classroom, and I've got some great ideas around that that I think would make it much better for our school system.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
We'll be back in a moment.
I'm ready. I want the adventure. I saw an SFU presentation back in my high school in Italy, and after a lot of research, I decided to enroll in the mechatronics program. And you know what? 3 years later, here I am working on my robots. Being in a cohort program such as TechOne was a great opportunity to make friends, and some of those friendships are still lasting nowadays. I think it's really important to try things out before you actually commit to them. And my co-op experience really helped me decide what I was going to do in life. SFU is not only a place where you learn, but also a place where you can share ideas and really grow as an individual. In my first year, I was looking for clubs at SFU, and I found Engineers Without Borders. It really changed my perspective of things, and after that, I also ended up changing my major. So now I'm in my third year in engineering physics, and after taking a TA position, I really discovered a love for teaching. What I want in my life is really more than just work. I want to take on some projects in Latin America, I want to travel, and I definitely see teaching in my future. A complete life.
Steve, where we left off, you were talking about ways to get more bang for the dollar in the schools, and I've heard you use the term shared services. Would you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, this is an area I think we could become more efficient. I don't necessarily like the word efficient, but every school district operates its own payroll system. Every school district operates its own procurement and HR systems. These are areas in this day and age with the advance of technology that could become more centralized. And I believe that we could centralize some of those functions and enable the funds saved through those directions and put that money back into the classroom. For me, that's certainly an area worth exploring. It's given the way school district funding works, about 92% of our budgets are for labor costs, and that's about the only way we can save money, unfortunately, and so it would mean potentially reductions in jobs in management and some of the support areas in the business management side. But if we can improve the funding in the classroom, and that's my ultimate goal, then I think it's worth exploring.
In a large dynamic school district like Vancouver, there are so many great stories to tell, and unfortunately, I don't think the public gets to hear many of the sorts of things you're talking about, the exciting innovations, the magnet programs, the different foci, the student activities that are going on. That seems to get obscured, and the cliche kind of reporting goes on about the same old issues over and over again.
Yeah.
But in the life of students, there are fascinating things going on in a district like Vancouver.
Yeah, my best days, Paul, are when I'm out in schools. And I try to get out to schools 2 or 3 times a week and spend several hours visiting with teachers and students and school administrators, support staff in our schools. And I'm always inspired by what I see. Great learning, great teaching going on in every part of our city. And I try to support what takes place. We see examples of the use of technology that I think is a part of the new world that we live in. Certainly students, they've grown up with technology now. We'll never catch up to students in terms of their abilities with technology. And so again, that's another part of what we do. And I think the modern day tablets, the iPads and other devices will provide a great opportunity. My vision for schooling is related to technology and personalized learning and student engagement. I believe that if you think of students gathered around the proverbial oak tree, they may be doing a project about the Fraser River here. They're using technology. They've gathered some data about the river systems and the environment around the river systems, and they're engaged in a conversation with students in Paris who are doing a similar project with the river systems there. They may even have a video conference with an expert from another jurisdiction, or they may be sharing across the school district, and that's where the role of technology and the excitement and engagement of our students comes in. And I believe it's not a science class, it's problem-based learning and real problems, not problems assigned as homework or projects assigned as homework, but the way we operate schooling, and instead of being an hour in one class and an hour in another, this is an ongoing community-based project that has real meaning for the students and also for our communities.
So now I can see what you mean by getting away from the siloed disciplines.
Exactly.
Now, and the fact that students can be in immediate contact with any place in the world through the internet is a phenomenal thing to imagine, a long way from pen pals that we grew up.
That's right, yeah. But an exciting opportunity, and when we look at the news every day and the world events, here's a way for students to truly engage in those world events and contribute their voices to what might be taking place in another part of the world. So I think we need to encourage that and give every opportunity. We need, as we do this, we need to make sure that we have equity of access, and this to me is one of the key barriers for learning throughout our system, throughout Vancouver and the province. And I'd like to just go into a little bit of student engagement, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
That we know that our students do exceptionally well on the international assessments, but in fact, probably less than 50% of our students who are attending school are not actually engaged in learning. They go to school to do school. They jump through the hoops of schooling, the requirements of schooling, the expectations of schooling. They're there for social reasons, but they're not truly engaged in school. It gets worse for some students, and they drop out of school. And we have a plateau with respect to the dropout rates in British Columbia and across Canada. About 20% of our students drop out each year. This is far worse than a number of other countries. It's even worse in terms of British Columbia and Canada for Aboriginal students, where it's somewhere hovering around 50%. That's not acceptable, and we need to change our system to truly engage all students in our schools. That goes to rural areas and urban areas of British Columbia.
Well, what I hear you illustrating that I often see on the people I talk to for this program is the deep caring and the innovative spirit that's there among our education community. And it's frustrating for some of us that this doesn't have full head and isn't allowed to dominate the scene in education, because the places that you'd like to take us are places that I think we ought to go for our young people.
I agree. Change is very difficult. It's something that for educators, it's a slow process. If I could change things overnight, I would, but we need to respect our employees. We need to respect the will and desires of parents and students and the community. We need to work together and be collaborative in designing the future. I'm very excited as to where we may be going in the next few years with respect to education, but we need to get there together. We need to have the conversations with all stakeholders and move together towards a new redesigned system. I won't use the word reform, I'll say redesigned. I think that's a better term that reflects a very positive school system that we've got and a great vision for the future.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
We'll be back in a moment. In many ways, democracy is alive and well in British Columbia. Evidence of this is our multiple party system, the recent changeovers in party leadership and the Premier's office, the vitality of the labor movement, and the popular challenge to the HST. Since in many ways democracy seems active and entrenched in BC, I am continually surprised at the top-down nature of public education in the province. Since the provincial government controls the purse strings rather than individual school district voters, local education officials, elected or non-elected, seem muted in their discussion of certain issues. Privately, they explain the ways the party in power can penalize a school district for challenging government policy. Mainly, these revolve around money, slowing down payments and denying discretionary spending, for example. We have seen that these penalties can include reputational attacks, too, since the ministry has a bully pulpit, a big microphone, and a cast of talking heads. On one level, the status quo makes for orderly relations between the schools and universities and the government, because university administrators are caught in the same web. On the other hand, however, many of the most informed voices in the education profession do not have the opportunity to speak frankly and engage in open debate about education policy. The local newspapers are of little help in framing the debate due to their editorial policies. One of the reasons Your Education Matters is presented to the public is to open broader channels of frank and informed communication about education in BC. At the same time, it bears saying that the autocratic tradition that has developed in education governance is not healthy and leads at times to the emperor's lack of clothing going unmentioned. Worst of all, the identity of the schools as a public good fades, and a disappointing emphasis on the economic and material uses of education is allowed to lead discussion. BC education is more and better than that. Thank you for thinking about Your Education Matters.